historical layout of football. They have to fit the historical layout of football.
For tonight's meeting was posted on the first floor, City Hall, and on the website on Tuesday, June the 10th, and notification was sent to the Henry Herald on Tuesday, June 10th. So yes, requirements have been met for a special call meeting.
Madam Clerk, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the council, I'd like to welcome you at this time. As we please rise, I'd like to call on Ms. Knight to lead us in the pledge. Council Stewart, would you have our invocation, please? Ms. Knight.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilman Stewart.
Let us pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we all say thank you for another opportunity to come and share your blessing with our citizens. And Father God, we hope that in this meeting that we do the right thing for our citizens. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much. Councilpersons, thank you so much. We got item number 4, approval of the agenda. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
And a second. Thank you. Any comments? Any questions? Ms. Price, please restate the motion in a second, please, ma'am.
The motion is to approve the agenda for tonight,
All right, if you so inclined, will you please raise your hand?
and there are 4 in favor.
Fair enough. Mr. Gardner, number 5. We interested in hearing from you at this time. You have the floor, young man.
Yes, sir. Second one from the left, Chief. Once again, Mayor and Council, this is look at the FY15 recommended budget submitted by the City Administrator. As you know, this process we started back in November, December of last year with our budget calendar, and then we went through a number of steps illustrating with you what our recommended our estimated revenues would be, and then what our expenses were looking like, and met with the department heads, got their requests. And as you know, we presented to y'all, we are looking at about a $12 million general fund revenue stream, and then we got our request from the department heads, and that came up to about $13-point-something million. And through the course of the months, we narrowed that down with our department head and made some adjustments, even recent adjustments, to reflect where we are today with the proposed budget. And so the budget that you have in front of you that we presented for the first read is revenues, balance revenues to expenses, $12.4 million revenues to expense, which is a 4.6 increase from the current fiscal year's budget adopted back in last year, June. Citywide budget is at 24.9, and expenses should be the same, I'm sorry. That's about a 9.1 increase from the prior year's citywide overall budget of $22 million, and that's basically reflecting our increase in revenues through the new SPLOS 4. And I tell you that, you know, we recently got our first check, I guess, for the month of April, and it came in over 20,000 higher than we expected at 250,000.
20,000 for the month higher
than what we were initially looking at. So, you know, there's ticking revenue above where we had estimated. So if that continues, we'll see a good lump sum of funds in our SPLOS funds and projects up right now. And we've talked about that already. But when we talk about the budget and what, you know, some of the guidance that we were looking at and moving forward with, and I apologize, this thing is flickering from color to color. It's not the laptop, it's the actual projector system that's doing that. But we looked at upgrading IT, and we've had some issues in there. We put a request in for IT administrator, and through funding some of the requests in that department through SPLOS, we were able to change some expenses around to put in for a new administrator. As you know, Steve is a one-man shop. We're now standing up the Public Works building. We're standing up the police department and their digital department, as well as City Hall, and we're coming under court, we'll be standing up the court facilities. It's hard for one man shop to keep up with all the help desk needs and IT and network administration needs and server needs and so forth. And so we basically, we had an approved request some years ago when we first went on to do a part-time, and we basically finagled that part-time, we had to put some lump sum in there, and we did away with the part-time and gave them a recommended for a full-time person to help him out, especially with our network administration side and help desk. Upgrading our server. As you know, we're still running some XP servers, and recently Microsoft is no longer maintaining or supporting XP, but still, we still have servers are still in need of upgrading, and we're going to do that through our SPOS. One of our biggest issues also is document imaging and storage. That's been a huge issue for me when I first got here, and still continues to be. How a lot of our minute books sitting in different closets in this building. That's the record of the city. If we have a fire in here, there's potential that is going to be gone. So we're able to try to get those. One of the other key IT thing we're looking at is court and audio, video, court and council. We're sitting here watching this thing flicker back and forth now. And as we utilize the system, the digital system, we've got to upgrade because obviously this isn't pleasant on your eyes or mine, because it's antiquated, need updating. One of the other major projects that's not listed on there is going to be our Wi-Fi. That was one of our initiatives. One of the other big initiatives is Unified Development Code, and we're moving forward in that process. We had our first meeting with our consultants to get our calendars and on board and our directions and so forth, and we met with staff and them. So that process is moving forward. Public safety, we've asked for an additional officer in public safety for the police department. Some of the expenses you see here is trying to get some of our outdated equipment and supplies done. The municipal court, one of the biggest blocks on that is that we've been paying close to $40,000 a year for those trailers. We're now probably entering into our 8th year, so do the math. And then asking for additional firefighters to help us interdict multiple incidents. And we'll go a little bit more in depth on that. We've got an organization and management study underway, and that's budgeted in this year as well. It started in this current fiscal year, but will carry over. Part of what we did was we were able to move some money there if we're going to look at the organization structure and all the management and operations, we should also look at our pay and compensation at the same time and get a 360 view of our government operations. I think that's only fair. And obviously we got transportation improvements, major projects that'll come up, eventually come to light in this year. We gave some of those, obviously the one repairing downtown street stations, some intersection improvements that'll be part of this year's SPOS improvements. When we talked about our general fund revenues, one of the things we looked at, all of our revenues from sources and taxes continue to be our #1 source on the general fund side, and I'll break that down even more so for you. And we're right at 9.3. The next one after that is license and fees, and then fines and forfeitures at 1.7 million. And government transfers, royalty rents and royalties, those make up the true bulk of our general fund revenue. And so when we talk about taxes, we go across the line between property taxes, what we call loss, which is local option sales tax, or your sales tax, franchise tax, insurance premium tax, alcohol tax, occupational tax, and financial institution tax. And so right now there's statistical tie between our loss at 2.8 and our property tax at 2.81 in terms of our chief tax sources, those being the two major ones. Franchise fees at 1.1 million. When we look at across the whole organization, general fund obviously is going to make up the bulk of our revenue source. When you think about all our taxes, fees, fines, forfeitures, royalties, and so forth at 12.4. Water and sewer will be the next largest one at 4.3. That's another major source on the enterprise side. Our special revenue funds with SPOS 4 and SPOS 3 funds still in the system. What we're seeing on SPOS 4, And if the numbers continue to show what they're showing, they're gonna be above what we estimated. That continues, if we get our next month check, that'll be a good sign that, you know, sales activities are happening. And as you know, we're now seeing a lot of growth in our sales with new development that are coming online. And we'll start to see that increase and bump in those areas as well. So those are the chief major, when we talk about, overall fund in terms of where our revenues come from. Stormwater, sanitation being 1.3, that's another major source, and we've seen a huge jump in hotel motel, this year, and there have been a number of events, and you know, we're bringing on one more hotel online, and that comes online, that we don't think is gonna cannibalize from the other ones, because that hasn't happened. So we assume that that's just gonna be a complement to what we already have in terms of our hotel suites here in the city. And we are the #1 hotel destination in Henry County. So when we talk about breaking down the expense side of the house, and we look at our expenses from where we categorize our sub-area: personnel services, purchase and contract services, supplies, machinery, and payment to others. Personnel obviously is our #1 expense, because people always, you pay people and their benefits, some single, some family, and, you know, we've seen a major increase in, group insurance, that's gone up 168,000. We put an additional increase in overtime, and that was just to cover us in case we have another two major storm events. We wanna make sure that we're covered, and if it doesn't, that'll be a savings, but we wanna make sure that we don't get caught off guard. And so we did put some extra overtime in there just in case we do have so many storm events this year, that will cover us. So there is an increase there. There's a decrease in purchase and contract services, and your purchase and contract services are your supplies, training, travel, those items in there, your cell phones and so forth, are covered under purchase contract services, technical and professional. I will tell you that we are budgeting this year for the management study as well as for the UDC that are in there as well, and our liability insurance. It's a single increase. Supplies are up a little bit from 1.1 last year to 1.3 this year. A lot of that is under the police department and the fire department, just upgrading their supplies, ammos, and those type of equipment that they need to function every day, and some of that stuff is time stamped. As Chief said before, our vests have a life here, 5 years, Chief?
5 years, yes.
After that, we've gotta replace them whether we use them or not. They need to be replaced. We can't, even though we didn't use them, we can't put an officer in the vest that's over 5 years old. And as you recognize from the recent event, it ain't always a catch-all in terms of saving our police officers, because we just lost one recently that got shot through his vest. So it's a safety, but it ain't gonna stop everything. Machinery is up slightly from 17 to 22,000, and payment to others, and that's basically where our court system pay other entities, and one of those, we pointed a few of those, like our victim assistance funds, county jail fund, and our education, driver's ed, and training funds are some of the ones. That's not all of them, but that's just a handful of who we didn't have to pay money to, and that's based on the volume of activities going on in our court. As that volume increase, our payment to others increase. And so when we talk about what's the makeup of our expenditures by type, just explain those different types, salaries and benefits for the make up about 60%, and that's typical in any government organization. The next one is contracts and services at right around 18%. 11% of that goes to supplies. Payment to others is at 3%, and machinery costs statistically under this is at 0, 22,000. That's kind of the breakdown. And so when we look at that #1 thing there, how do we break down overall compared to last year? Slightly up from last year, down up from last year, just slightly. The black yellow is the 2014, this current year. The gray is our proposed FY15 year. So you can see, and it's only skewed like this because this number is in the millions and these are in the hundreds of thousands, and that's why it's skewed that way. So I try to increase it so you get a better reflection of where those costs are compared to last year. So So when we talk about how we break down by function, on the expenditure side, 54% of our general fund budget go to public safety. That's police, fire, court, probation. And that's typical. And as I explained to you guys, the organization I came from, that number is in the 70s, close to 80s, in terms of what they pay for public safety in Griffin. Population same size as us, but they got issues. And so.
Also in Forest Park, it's much higher.
It's much higher as well, it's in that area as well. And you'll see some comparisons later on when we compare ourselves, benchmark ourselves against some of our adjacent communities that are similar to us. But that's the breakdown from what we call general government, which is mayor, council, administrative services, public safety, police, fire, court, probation, highways, which is our building maintenance. And one of the things we did last year for the first time is strip out all of our electrical costs, building maintenance costs as we know it. That way we can kind of see where our money is going in these different entities. Before, every department had some portion of this money captured in their budget. So we basically created that fund so we can now see where our costs are going. And Lynn has been able to track down a lot of hidden costs. Some things going places, and we're able to look at these anomalies. Before it was hard to find them because they were all in multiple departments, so that's been helpful. But that's increased from last year because now we're actually tracking it better, and we can tell where things are going. Our streets department, cemetery and parks, and we'll talk a little bit about that because that's gonna be an important thing moving forward. Community development and economic development, we kind of lumped them together because they're symbiotic. And so we tried them as an entity, just to make it simpler for you, because the more you see the vision in the slide. But that's basically how our budget breaks down on the general fund side.
General, government, mayor and council that's education,
That's everything.
that's
That's the
education, travel.
That's everything.
Oh, I know, but-
Salaries, salaries, supplies,
Yeah, okay.
as well as, machineries and the study, that we put in the budget.
So the study is under
Under mayor and
Mayor,
council. And, administration,
Administration is your city clerk and your HR are captured in there. Finance is captured here, city administrator, I might change that. No, not issue that, city administrator is here and IT is here. And as you go through your budget document in the general fund side, you'll see those.
What makes the finance number so high?
Before, this number
Insurance.
was mostly reflected under the city clerk. And we moved some of those costs from the city clerk budget into the finance department budget. And so that's why their budget has jumped compared to last year. So if you go into their budget and try to track back,
Yeah,
And
that's
look
what
at
I
the
saw,
history,
yeah.
that's-
Saw a big disparity.
and that's why we moved all those insurance costs over. When we hired the leaders, we thought it was best to put those costs in finance rather than, I can recognize that, years ago, a lot of those functions were in Genesis and Ms. Evelyn's purview. Because back then, we didn't have a finance director.
Right.
And so that's where a lot of that is, and so now we moved some of those costs over.
And we're in line is basically with the Georgia State account codes and departments. We follow the state guidelines.
So when we talk about the general fund and where it's been, we've tracked it back to 2010, and those 2 years there are somewhat of an anomaly because that's where we went from calendar year to fiscal year to some degree. You'll see that anomaly when we go to the overall budget. But that's kind of where we've been over the last couple of years with the recommendation under this budget.
so this is, over a 5-year
Yes,
period,
yes,
from 10 to 12.
yes. 09, 010, 010, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, and it would be
14,
14, 15. And so when we look at that almost that same period of time from our overall city budget, where we've gone and the anomaly being, I think it's right in here somewhere, where we switched over calendar year, I think it was 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. And that's where we've been tracking down, and then when we put in our new loss of $2.8 million inside that area, we track back up on with the new source of SPLOST funds revenues coming in, that additional revenue. that's laid on top of what we have on as the remnant of SPOS 3. One of the things I always tell you, since I've been here, we look at, where we were historically from our population, and there's a wonderful website that tracks our population back into the number of years. In an actual fact, they give a better accurate count of the population because this was a census year for us, 2010, and the census is not a true count, it's statistically an undercount of your population because not everybody filed. So your population was higher than that in 2010, but that's what we use as a benchmark because census is what we use. But up until we estimated, the last census gave us 22,599 in 2012. We did around about a 3% growth rate is where they say we are, so we extrapolate that out a little bit to kind of get an idea where we think we are, and that might be a little bit high.
You think that one's high? I would think it was be a little bit low because we've continued to,
We've added a number of multifamily units since 2010.
not only that, but you've got subdivisions that are developments that are now
That are
growing.
coming in, so that number's gonna charge.
And you have fewer vacancies.
That too, and I'll show you later on some of the developments that have actually kicked off in the
Yeah, fewer vacancies not only in your multifamily, but in your home rentals. Because you ride your neighborhoods and you can see there are fewer vacancies now.
And so what we do is we benchmark ourselves to determine per 1,000 residents, how many employees we have, so you kind of get an idea where we were back in '09 at about 8.2 employees per 1,000 residents. We're pretty much around about 701 employees per 1,000 residents in
And
2014.
the school system has adjusted out some population in McDonough, has adjusted out to some other schools, to keep the schools in the city of McDonough at certain levels. And so that's probably closer to being true than high.
And so when we talked about how do we benchmark ourselves to some of the other communities that are pretty much around our size, I used to have a couple of north side cities in here and I removed them. So when you talk about employees per 1,000, Forest Park is right at 8.3, we're at 7.1-ish. Griffin is at 19.9, and even if you strip away Griffin's utilities, their employees, 37 employees they have in their electric department, they're right around 9, almost 10 employees per 1,000 residents. Union City, that's outside of the court, because the jail, they've now closed the jail, so they're at 8.4, and the jail's still been in operation, that'll be probably higher. Conyers is at 13.6 employees per 1,000 residents, and Carrollton is at 12 employees per 1,000 residents. So that's kind of pretty much, and this is our population benchmarks, where they are in population.
Does Carrollton or Conyers have utilities?
Carrollton has the aquatic center. That's part of their city operations. I don't think they have gas. They have water and sewer. I don't think they have gas or electric. They're not a member of BI. Carrollton is not a member of BI. And I didn't put LaGrange in here because they do have natural gas and they have electric and they've got solid waste. So some of the things that capital, what we see from major capital projects, some of these are predicated on the adoption of the budget. Is obviously construction of our cost, which is replacing the outdated church, the new building that we're using and the trailers, the expansion of the cemetery, our server and desktops, getting into life cycle management with our desktops, and now placing our outdated service and providing Wi-Fi service in this coming year. Public Works, looking at our new service pumps for the water plants, water meter replacement, and a truck, and they've got a couple other things in of capital projects items in there. So those are some of the major ones that we'll be looking at over the course of the next year. And then to our alternative, and this came forth at the May 19th meeting, where we were asked to look at funding because our current budget at 12.4 doesn't include any additional staffing for police and fire, so we were asked to go ahead and look at that. We, over the course of that time, we come up with a number of scenarios, and one of them was funding all the requests for public safety in terms of fire at 4, police at 4, the municipal court, and public works requests for more employees for streets department. As we go around through our scenarios, we strip down those, because those all, in order to fund them under the budget, would require millage rate adjustment above 5.5, almost 6, and in speaking with some of the council members, that was not tenable for them. And so we basically went down to the option that we thought was the most sustainable one, and the reason why, and I'll go into a little detail with addressing more of the fire side and the police side, and then funding the court would be, and that's what we were saying was outside, if the council doesn't want to adopt the budget as is, but want to include the public safety, that would move the millage rate from 4.3 to 4.99.
Would that include it, 4.387? Would that include the, excuse me, the fund for the municipal court?
No, ma'am. And so with that, we looked at making, what would be the benefit if we made that investment, and specifically as we relate to the fire side, was the potential to offset the millage rate adjustment, and how, in our conversations with Chief, one of the things that he remarked on was that when they did the last ISO rating, one of the key sticking points between us getting to ISO rating 3, ISO rating is 3, was our staffing level. Our water supplies are actually better than they was when ISO was here the last time, because we've added an additional water tank. So our water supplies are much better than it was then. Our issue is always gonna be staffing. And so what we looked at is if we add those additional 4 officers, there is a really high probability of us decreasing our ISO rating from 4 to 3. And what does that mean? If that happens, there's a reduction in the residential millage and commercial insurance premiums.
And before you go into that, I want to remind everybody, and the mayor wasn't here for the meeting, but we had a citizen that stood up, and which is really what I'm hearing throughout the community. We had a citizen that stood up and said, and I believe he had contacted us about the, why things were going up and what have you. And he said that he didn't think that that was as important as the fact that he was down at the fire department and nobody was there, and they'd gone out on a call. And if something had happened just directly across the street, even though there was a truck there weren't people to operate it.
Yes, and he
And-
made a really good point.
Yeah, and he said that he thought, in his mind, that was not as much of a reason to be doing it as the simple fact that we need enough people there to be able to operate those 2 trucks at all times, because, once again, if nobody was there to utilize that truck, they would then have to go to, across the railroad track at, out on Industrial Boulevard.
Fire station.
And if there was a train, then you'd have to look and hope that the one up at
Fire station 7.
155 could make it down, but by the time all of that would be occurring, right across the street, whatever was going on and whatever was truly needed could be over with.
You've cost time. I think you made a good point too, that the ISO is a benefit, not a selling point.
Right.
Correct.
He's exactly right, that chances are you're gonna decrease, but it's not a guarantee, and it's gonna be different person to person, and it's a pure benefit if the ISO is lower, and it still is. It's not a selling point.
No, the selling point is the issue of fire protection.
Safety.
And safety. And this is something that I've had conversations with all of you, including the mayor, because as we know it, you, and I gave the example to you, and I'm just using 40 Lawrenceville Street just as an example, but let's say Miss Gertrude that lives at 40 Lawrenceville Street thought she's having a heart attack, so she dials 911, and guess who responds? Fire Station 51. So Fire Station 51 rolls out and they go to Miss Gertrude's house. But right on Sloan Street, Miss Gardner calls because she's got a grease fire. Well, guess what? You're right. That station is effectively shut down. I've got a pumper truck over there, but I got no way to operate it. So now they gotta rely on the truck to come from Fire Station 1. And if by some chance, how many trains do we have coming through a day? Some close to 40? So
46.
46. So if one of those 46 comes through at the same time that fire truck is coming down 2081, now they've got to call dispatch and call for another fire truck to come from Fire Station 7. The town is going to take Fire Station 7 to mobilize. Chief said 3 to 5 minutes before that fire becomes fully engulfed. So at that point, that house is in critical condition, and we're still on the way to respond. And that person is thinking, why is it taking so long to get a fire truck here? Because the fire station is right across the street. Not realizing that the manpower is not there to provide the true adequate public safety tool.
Now, in all these conversations we've had, we've always been talking about Station 51. Would this also fully staff the Avalon station?
Yes.
Because every example we've given has only been here, but out there we have some large commercial buildings
And
more
increasing.
economic. So that's really where my concern is over there.
And the reason why I use this side of the train track is because of the proximity of Fire Station 1 and Fire Station 52. There's not a major, I gotta say, man-made impediment to
Right.
stop that truck from getting over there to assist 51, Fire Station 52. And then you have another fire station that can interject from the Hampton area as well.
It's true.
Even though that fire station run into the county more than the one here, to help the county more so. But that's the issue that you run into, is that staffing would allow for us, for chief then, to be able to have multiple folks on shift to deal with multiple incidents at one time. And as I've explained, we're not getting any smaller. We're continuing to become a larger
We've just
city.
been lucky.
And that's it.
We've just
It
been
should be
lucky.
nice. Yes,
And thank you for a great presentation. I was listening from the audience, didn't want to disrupt it. But I want to ask a question because growth does concern me, and we already know that we've got the houses on the ground, so it's going to happen. But in terms of being able to actually fully staff our fire department, have there been any further communications with the county regarding the bay for the ambulance? And would this increase in any way move us any closer to being able to have an ambulance actually on site?
No, ma'am. The last conversation we had with the chief and some of the other officials over there, there's no plan for them to put an ambulance at that station.
Even though we
On
have the
county side.
agreement?
Yes, ma'am.
And even though it's been going on for over 10 years.
Yes, ma'am. There's no plan for us to staff it up ourselves, and then chief gave the example, when this question was raised the last time, what that would take in order to fund the ambulance, because it's a different scenario on how you have to have manpower always available.
And I'm going to say this about the millage increase. We increased the millage before, and both Mrs. Vinson and I, and she can correct me if I'm saying something wrong where she's concerned, but we both urged that what millage we put in, that it be dedicated to public safety. And this, once again, is coming up, and we're raising it, and while they're getting some, it's not dedicated, that millage is not dedicated. So, as we continue to grow, we don't have anything to, offset it. And what I worry about is not having a dedicated millage, for
And I did.
public safety.
I did make inquiry about that, and what I've learned is in the state of Georgia, there are no provisions for a specific amount of tax to be dedicated for public safety. So we can't have a public safety tax.
We'll start with the
So when we do it like this, we just have to divide it where it becomes,
I know, but I don't want it, I guess what I'm saying to all of us is that we've got to make sure that that money goes to public safety, if that's what we are thinking.
Yes, ma'am, and the best way to be able to track it is obviously if the goal and the wish of the council is to go in that direction. The key is that when you see those additional firefighters being introduced to you, you'll understand that that cost is being captured through, paid for through that increase in the millage. You know, and the key is, you know, as we continue to grow as a community, and as I expressed to y'all, if we start rezoning every piece of property, any property in the city that limits now for the next 10 years, you put a moratorium on rezonings. But you won't put a moratorium on building permits, which you can't do for an indefinite amount of time. This community has already zoned enough property that when you take all of those lots and you just times it by the statistic census average household size, you're at 40,000 plus people. That's if you don't rezone one more piece of property. Okay, that's how much activity was going on here, and think about this. Even through that time between, and I'm gonna show you all this, even between that time between 2000 and 2010, that was 160% growth rate. To go from 8,800 people to 22,084. Okay, and had the economy not slowed the last 5 years, imagine where you would typically be. And the one city that Keith and I had a conversation is your sister city called Noonan, which is typically about the same size you guys have been over the last 27 years, and right around the same growth rate spurt was going on. And so they're at 36,000 people. So you get a benchmark using them. That's pretty much where we probably would have been had we not just slowed. They were going a little faster than us, but at the same time, that's where we would be. And so when we talk about the millage rate and what that means to an average homeowner, I'll kind of give you a history when we talk about the bump that happened back then, and to show you where we were some years ago. And this was, you know, some of the years prior to this, going into 2004, 2005, 2006, the millage rate was actually decreasing because one of the things that was going on here was you weren't truly funding general fund. Okay, general fund was being subsidized through water because there was always being built in what we call a structural deficit. Okay, where we were spending more on the general fund than the general fund revenues could suffice. And so what we did was transfer money, but at the same time we were doing that, we were lowering the millage rate, which created a huge problem now, 10 years later.
Right. Afraid I cut you off, but I know when we say here conversation, why not, let's talk about getting the millage rate or whatever up to what it needs to be to cover everything that needs to be covered. Because we wait till next year to do it, then, you know, we're gonna get the same point. And just get back to, talk about what you said about why it's so important to man this station.
Well, this could be both stations.
Yeah, because number one, the train. I can look at the train. You got train, if a train stop on the track, and that's time, you know. I had a conversation about 10 people. They called it, and I told about the millage rate, the tax, or whatever. They said, we're here, you know, to not to be served, we have to serve our citizens, you know. And that conversation with those citizens, they didn't have no problem with, you know, raising the millage or whatever, because, you know, safety come first. We want to be safe and not be sorry if something happens. We want to have everything put, you know. Because we can sit here, you know, all day long.
And to answer your question, I think, you know, Councilman Steele, I think there's a limit. I mean, you know, as we continue to grow and as I go through this presentation, you're gonna see some things I'm gonna talk about in terms of what we need to look at. And as I told y'all at the meeting on Thursday, you know, this council has to have a frank and honest conversation about what level of service we want to provide to the citizens of McDonough, new, old, and the ones that are continuing to call this place home in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. Because if you don't do that, you're doing those new residents a disservice. And you're gonna be doing the other ones. So you have to have this conversation about where we want this community to be.
And I really wanted to highlight your process.
kudos to Bernal and all of staff who went through the process of actually, Lolita, I'm sorry, I left you out. But, I mean, I just appreciate the fact that there was actually a methodology that was followed in terms of identifying the cost for service delivery. Because historically, we've, as a body, have kind of taken the position of, well, we really don't want to raise taxes, we're already trying to run lean, but nobody has ever taken the time to really do the necessary projections in terms of the number of citizens, how much it costs per household, looking at what future service delivery costs were going to be. And I just saw in your report that all of those areas were actually addressed when you met with your department heads and trying to really identify what the recommendations would mean. So what I really want to kind of remind us of is the fact that for years we did not increase our millage rate. We actually did rollbacks for several years, but at the same time, there was actually an increase in citizens and an increase in the need for additional service delivery, and that wasn't addressed. So we find ourselves at the point now where we can barely move forward without really taking the time to stop and evaluate where we are.
And I think that's a conversation we need to sit down and have, but I think it's needed from the standpoint of, like I said, I mean, it's about the present, but it's also about the future. And what do we want this community to be moving forward? And as the mayor always tells us, you know, to be that new promised land to our current and future residents, what does that mean? What are we willing to what does this community want to look like down the road? But that conversation has to be had. I mean,
I want to ask a quick question, if I can. I just want to ask this question just to kind of get it out of my mind if it's not an option. But I hear Mayor Copeland's concern as it relates to, and I don't know if you actually have a plan, Mayor, in terms of trimming the budget by $500,000. But my question is, because the concern, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is the fact that our fund balance is not at the level that we would like for it to be in an optimum scenario. So my question becomes, is it possible, because that is the issue and that is the concern, can we borrow money from our water fund to basically supplement our fund balance and then pay that back as we get the cemetery fund and the other enterprise fund up and start collecting the fees from that?
Well, let me say, there really is no need to do that, because as I said when we were doing the audit, that the reason that caused the decrease in the fund balance was the sale of the cemetery.
Right.
That was last year.
Right.
I said it was a timing issue, where we sold it, so now fund balance is going to come back up.
Okay.
But it's gonna take time.
No, it's an immediate transaction. What that was it's cash, either you have cash or you have a fixed asset that you can't sell. So that was the difference. So what we have done is we've sold the asset this year. Last year the money we used to buy the property. Now this year we sold it to the cemetery fund. So that means that income comes right back in this year.
So we don't have a fund balance issue.
We would
After this
we would
is-
put it back where it was last year.
and the key to that is we spent roughly right around $1.2 million on all the costs associated with the commercial property. And so because we didn't create a cemetery fund by which to actually capture the revenue on the expense side of it, the expense was hit on the general fund. But the general fund can't hold the property. We've now created the cemetery fund, which was approved and blessed by our auditor that was a good way to go about it.
But we don't have that cash.
No, but when we transfer the property over, the value of that property has to be reciprocated back to the general fund. You just don't transfer it over and leave it. So the value of that property, $1.2 million, comes back to the general fund as revenue.
You're switching the short term
You
assets
switch
to long
long term. What we said as part of the scenario
But when
was,
does that happen? What's the timing on that?
Then,
Is we sell the cemetery,
as,
the plots.
well,
Which will
on-
take time.
Yes,
Do what? You make
then we
When
sell
you
the
sell the
plots.
plots, the money go back.
The
to
cash side of it
Talking about-
goes, we,
A
they,
future income stream, you're not talking about something immediate, you know better than that.
no.
But that's gonna take a year, right?
Yes, what we're saying is this, on papers, because you have an asset, on paper, the value of that asset is transferred back to the general
I
fund.
understand that, but
The
it's,
general fund would put that value of that asset into fund balance.
I
The key
understand
there
that,
is
but it's,
now,
but it's.
cash, on the cash side of this is, what we said was, as we sell cemetery plots, we want to make sure that a portion of those sales are transactions. So let's say I sell a plot for $1,000. $1,000 of that plot would go to the cemetery fund. Well, technically, all of it would go to the cemetery fund, but then we would transfer 500 of that to the fund balance. So now what you're doing is, even though you're holding the value of that asset in your general fund balance, you're also now building your cash reserves is what you do.
When will we start selling plots?
The RFP was put out I should get responses back on the 27th.
June?
Of June, and then we'll evaluate those firms, and then pick a firm, and then ask a firm to do the design.
And-
And then from that, what the cost of that design would be, recognizing I have a $500 budget.
Can we create
Mr.
a waiting list?
Mr. Gardner,
Yes, ma'am.
may I?
I was just gonna ask, can we create a waiting list so that when we hit the day where we can sell it, we're not then asking people who's interested, we already
I think you
know.
have a natural waiting list right now, to be honest with you.
Can I,
Yes, ma'am.
please, I have said this many times. We have 2 lots right in the front that does not require a major firm to do anything about laying out how many lots can go there. They are that space, based on the already existing layout of the cemetery, could be laid out by any number of staff members that we have, starting with Keith's department, Rodney's department, and so on. Those could be laid out, put on the website for sale. And part of that money should be utilized then to pick up the lot that is for sale. And the same thing done with it. There are 3 lots across the front, one of which we don't own.
What I've asked.
And wait a minute, and if we would quit dragging ourselves around the block 60 million times, we would already have money from those sales that could be put in general fund or used to move forward to do whatever we needed to, to make sure that the new 7 acres are looked at properly. And there's other acreage that needs to be looked at on, closer to town. But that's money right there. We don't have to wait on anything. Utilize existing staff and sell them. And you could do that within a month.
Yes, ma'am. What I've done through this process, and if you all disagree with it, I will take it off the website and redo it. What I want, and as your staff, is to look at all of that property that fronts Macon Street, basically from the main gate all the way back to the Mercer property. And look how them lay out for us, all of that property. So as we acquire all of that extra property, I know we have 2 lots, but at the same time, yes, I didn't have any money in the budget to make sure that the soil testing is correct and what is usable and what's not usable, because even though you might see the ground there, that might not be the best place to put a lot, depending on, but that has to be studied.
So you're saying we're designing at one
At
time?
the same time, I'm asking them to do a master plan of that, squaring off the entire area, and so as we acquire those properties, if there are changes down the road, you have a plan
Well, what I'm
that's already
saying
done in
is,
place by
though,
which to
we
lay
still-
out and do those lots. So,
We still need to make the 2 existing lots that we own, that are right there, a part of the original cemetery. Soil testing on that cannot be astronomical, and that can be done, and those lots can be sold. It does not change the overall thing that you're talking about doing. Does not change it in any way, but it does put capital there that does not have to come from any other place.
And if the council is in agreement with Gail, I would give Keith and his staff to do whatever is necessary to get those.
I'd like to make that into a motion, that those two, I'm gonna make a motion. And you can say no if you like, okay? I'd like to make a motion that the two lots that we own directly on the front of the cemetery be soil tested and laid out and for plots, cemetery plots, and be made available for sale as soon as possible. That does not change any design at all. And I'm one of the people that worked very hard to get the cemetery where it was 10 years ago. Granted, there hadn't been a whole lot done since then, but that does not change anything. What it does is it puts money in the cemetery fund to actually move forward with what is being proposed by council as a whole, as an overall design. I put that in the form of a motion, please.
Mayor, point of order, and while I respect Council Person's Nadi's position, and I do agree with you that there are further discussions that need to take place relative to the cemetery within the confinements of why we are legally here. We are here to discuss the 2015 proposed budget and to take any other actions outside of what we have advertised is outside of what we are allowed to do.
Well, I think that is part of the budget, is it not?
It is not a part of the budget.
The cemetery is part of the budget.
Well, everything in the city then is a part of the budget. But in terms of what we have advertised and the purpose of this meeting, we need to make sure that everything is germane to the point of the
Yes,
budget.
go ahead, Fred.
I think I have a solution.
Yeah, thank you.
And if it is the wish of the council, we could make a motion to amend the agenda, correct me if I'm wrong, and be able to put it on the agenda, if that's the wish of the council.
Well, I'm not prepared. I have
So,
not.
I mean, I'm just giving them, just
I was
throwing
gonna say,
them out.
I do not know.
I don't know. I don't either.
Two
I
lots.
mean, this is just a
Laid
discussion.
out in plots,
I don't know the two lots, I haven't looked at it, I wasn't prepared
directly
for it.
across from the,
I understand where they
Well,
are.
that's, see, and I didn't know whether anybody was oriented to the fact, I assume that's what you were talking about.
absolutely, there's only two lots that we
And
own,
I
it's
think
directly
I
on.
think your comment has merit, but I think we ought to postpone that discussion.
Well, we've been postponing it
Well,
forever.
But I
Nothing's been done about it.
I fully support what
For
you
years.
suggested. That generates capital really immediately. That property's ready to go.
Yes, and like I said, it's been said over and over and over, and I think I'll be happy to withdraw it,
If you
but I
will.
do want y'all to understand this. On Monday, I will see that agenda amended. There is no earthly reason
That's fine.
why we should not be selling those two.
I couldn't agree
Plots.
more, man. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. Let's move on, Fred.
Wait, she was talking.
She withdrew
I
that.
withdrew
She
it.
withdrew it.
And
Thank you, thank you.
Dennis, can we put that on the agenda for Monday?
I was gonna ask that we put it on the July 1st agenda because we need to have information. I mean, I honestly don't know. You're saying sell lots, but what our city administrator is saying is that there are soil tests and all of these things that have to take place. Don't you have to find out cost associated with that and where that money is coming from? That's what I thought. So you don't just kind of throw this out there because there's a dollar value associated with the action. I don't mind it being a part of the discussion, but
How much longer
July
do you wanna
1st would
wait?
be that day.
Do you know how long it would take to pick up the phone to find out how soil sampling would cost?
Gail, he has to find a line item in which to pay for the
Yes.
action.
Okay, Ms. Stewart.
I'm sure you can do that.
Yeah, I'm sitting here and I know I went through the process with those houses that I was torn down, and I know for a fact that that property next to the cemetery is not ready, for burial.
The two plots.
No. The one of them is not ready, I know for a fact. So we'll get that later, but
Yeah.
it's not ready yet. I know for a fact.
It's a great potential
Yeah, because
for an income stream, and it's ready. People are interested in that.
Well,
In
yeah,
fact,
you get to see
I'd
it.
like to be one of the first out there myself. I don't want to go today.
Why have we just, just have it done, just hadn't had it done, hadn't had it budgeted?
I mean,
Been talking about it for years.
I'm afraid, let's move on with your presentation.
It's not something
And
new,
then
it's
on Monday,
years.
if we decide, to amend the agenda, we can vote on that relative to it. I think it's a viable option that we have, and it does generate, an income stream that's, if you just take that 1 acre, it don't take long, we go wheels in your head, get that, and that creates some capital.
And all I wanna do is give you permission to get things
If
done.
y'all allow me, Mr. Mayor, we can come up with a scenario if to make it happen in a quick time. I mean, if y'all allow it, and I'll just say it just to get it out of the way. You know, we could pull some, because it's all cemetery related, we could pull some of the existing funds that we just acquired, we can make that happen.
Come on,
Through the SPOS
Yes.
funds, and that would be my recommendation to do it. The only reason why, you know, I wanna make sure that we do a true master plan, everything, I make sure.
I'm not saying not do
And-
that, just
yes.
utilize that to help us down the road.
And, you know, I don't think any of our staff here has ever laid out a graveyard before. I know I haven't. And so, you know, and how accurate do we need to be and what the requirements are. I know in the days you could just string a rope, measure out and be done with it. I don't know if that process still exists. But I'll find out between now and the next meeting
Fair enough.
and be able to try to bring back some information to y'all and then try to see if we can move forward. I agree with all, I think everybody understands, yes, if we can get it off and moving, that's a quick stream of revenue for now, and I agree with everybody on that. I just, at the same time, I just want us to understand that, you know, ultimately, I want us to have a true plan for the entire corridor that basically encompasses those properties, plus the other ones that we currently don't have in ownership. So when we do get those in ownership, it'll be easy for a company to come in and lay those plots out for us, geolocate them, because unlike the current cemetery, I want our new one, being able to geolocate people on public finding stuff. So that's pretty much where we're going, but that'll be a discussion. Just how,
Is that for the July 1 workshop?
if you all allow me to, that'll give us time to get all the information
You will.
necessary, because between now and Monday,
But I don't wanna see anything postponed beyond that. Because the reality is, and I'm gonna say it one more time for the record, those two lots directly across from Wesley Chapel and the court area are going to have to conform in layout to the existing historical cemetery. So, any of our staff
It's fine.
have the ability, we have numerous members on our staff that have the ability to lay out based on the existing grid, okay? So there's no reason why we can't move down the road
we'll make it up.
get it done.
Thank you, Fred.
Yes, sir. Just giving you kind of brief history on where we were with the millage. Going back, we basically rolled back the millage rate some over the last couple of years. Just by virtue of we're seeing lost income. So the millage rate, even though it was set at 3.99 in 2012, has actually decreased to 3.97. And if the council so approved to go to 4.99, that's what it would look like. Now, in essence, to capture where you are in terms of your current budget and the millage rate, you know, the state lays out a formula by which we go by. And when we use our existing budget and take out those revenue sources other than property tax, and we get that 3.09, and divide that by our assessed value of all our properties, which is $674,424,731. That gives us a millage rate of 4.59 in essence, so that's where we should be. So if the mayor and council doesn't increase the millage rate and keep it where it's at, technically we just had to roll back on our millage rate because it should be set there, but it'll be at 4.39. So what does that mean for our house in terms of what we looked at under our current millage rate? So a house of 100,000 right now pays city tax, and this is just capturing the city tax, not the school board or the county or the state, just the city taxes. They're paying in tax on an annual basis $175.48 to the city. If the mayor and council proposed to move the real estate to 4.99, that increase will be by $24.40 on an annual basis to $199. The probability on terms of the ISO rating and what those savings would be, if ISO is approved and those individual homeowners will see some form, thanks to our Councilmember Elrod and his knowledge of the insurance industry, he's worked out these numbers for us. That increase would be, decrease in the insurance premium would be roughly about $21.
And I'll say it again,
That's not
Is
guaranteed.
that for all your residents on the east side?
That's,
On the west side?
that if they capture that savings, that will be anybody in that $100,000 range, whether they're on the east side or
and that
west.
number is gonna be wildly different.
Yes, and it's gonna fluctuate.
And that's regardless of whether they're not, they're serviced by the county or by the
That doesn't
city?
matter. I don't think it matters, as long as they're within the city jurisdiction.
Gotta be in the city limits.
The city limits.
To get the ISO, and what I say is gonna be wildly different is that insurance is based off of age, credit score, year built of your house, the size of your house, the construction of your house, your claim history. So this would be wildly different. These are purely estimates based off of just a typical policy that I've seen.
So, off a typical policy, somebody that, in bankruptcy, whatever. So, in essence, on a typical policy, let's say that household has a $100,000 home, the assessed value is not on the whole thing, but it's on 40% of it. They would see basically, their insurance premium decrease roughly estimated by $21. So in essence, their net increase would only be by $3.40 a year, or 28 cents a month, is what they would be. In actual fact, a house valued at 150, according to the numbers estimated, would actually see a little bit more, would see the best savings of anybody, and our median house is somewhere between 100 and 150, somewhere around 120 is the median house price in the city at this time. So they're seeing an increase of $36, but if their ISO rating does happen and they benefit from it, there's a potential for them to see a $34 decrease in insurance, which is a $2.60 annual increase, or 22 cents a month. And the same thing, the highest one would be obviously a house of $350,000, which we don't have that many of those in the city. They would see an $85 increase, or annualized. Their savings could potentially be $73, or an annual increase of $12, which is about a month increase in taxes. So that's basically what it would look like, the net impact would be. No ISO rating, those would be the increases. So $24 a year, divide that by 12, and that basically gives you how much a month they would be paying additional, about $2. And so when we talk about the distribution of the tax, and I always like to show this because, for everybody that has a tax dollar, as you pay that individual tax dollar, this is pretty much how it goes. The Board of Education, unless you're 65 and older and gets an exemption on not having kids in the school system, 57 cents of your dollar goes to the school board. About another 20-something cents of your dollar goes to Henry County. About 10 cents goes to City of McDonough, and the state gets about a 0.3 in there, and that number is ever decreasing. I think the state is getting to the point where they're almost going to zero on collections of property tax. But that's basically a rough breakdown of how your individual tax dollars is kept. So I always try to tell folks, when you're worried about how I'm spending your 10 cents, you should be worrying about what the Board of Education is spending your 57 cents on. And if you just saw their budget adoption at $303 million, yeah, I would love to know where the bulk of that money's going. And Henry County proposed a budget increase and a tap into fund balance this year. And so their budget is increased this year, and I don't know how they're doing that as a citizen. Recognizing that as a City of McDonough residents, you pay less than somebody in the unincorporated just because of the issue of fire, police, planning and zoning functions. They give us a rebate on that, so we don't pay the same millage rate as somebody that's in the unincorporated, really low. So when we talk about comparison of the millage rate, some of our neighboring cities, the same cities we just discussed in terms of their staffing level and where they are. Forest Park millage rate is at 14.7 mils. McDonough's 4.38. That's where we are. That's where we're proposing. If public safety, if you want to fund the public safety, 4.9. Griffin is at is like 8.6, mills, and that's including having the electric utility, which they subsidize the general fund in this year's budget by 8 point something million dollars. They have a built-in structural deficit on the general fund side, and that's because they pay almost 80% of their general fund into police and fire, and mostly police. Union City is at 15.9, Conyers is at 13.8, Carrollton is about 6.9 mills. And a lot of this, and it's funny, I was showing the staff an article, who was it, the city of Smyrna, and they were talking about their tax, I think they were at 8 point something mills, and their 8 point something mills generate 1.6 million in property tax. Anybody know why? The value of their houses are much more higher than ours. And so that's the reason why even at 8 mills, they generate twice as much per house. So 1 mill of, let me rephrase that. 1 mill of tax in our city is right around 600,000. 1 mill of tax in the city of Smyrna is $6 million in the result. So it's over twice as high. So their houses are much more valuable. But I remember 20 years ago, when I first came to the States and was coming to a lot of folks used to tell me, don't go in Smyrna and don't go in Decatur. Because look at where they are now, so 27 years later.
And you were talking about the school budget. In Henry County, the reason you don't see certain things in your school in Henry County is because it takes a $350,000 house to support one child in the school system today. So when the majority of ours fall between 100 to 150,000 and they have multiple children, you're talking about having to take state, federal, and our tax base and spread it very thin. You're not talking about having a lot of excess funds for, a lot of the things that you see in a lot of other school systems. And yet the Henry County's doing an extremely good job because because I think of their teaching staffs, not because of what other tools they have. And I certainly taught in the lowest socioeconomic school in the county, and we had virtually nothing. And Mayor Copeland's wife was there with me, along with her sister, and we can all attest, all those years, that there was virtually nothing available to us when you compared us with almost any other area you can think of. So we need to be mindful when we're sitting here thinking about what we're developing. The lower the price of the home or the rental unit or whatever, the greater the burden on our public school system. And without it staying at a high standard, then you cannot maintain those property values. So our school system has to maintain, and we've been very lucky that it has, and especially for homeowners with, $100,000 to $150,000 homes, because once that bubble bursts with our school system, the majority of our homes become worthless.
Okay, Fred,
Yes, sir.
please continue.
And piggyback on that, residential don't usually pay its fair share, as we know it, and to pay its fair share, 10 years ago, it used to be a house at $110,000 to pay its fair share in tax services. And I think that number's switched now, I don't know where it is today, but I know that was 10 years ago.
350 for one child in school.
And so when we talk about looking down the road in the coming years and what's gonna happen, we talk about the new developments that are coming on board with the South Point Power Center coming on board and some of the developments down there. Avalon with some of the car dealerships that are coming on board and the commercial strips in that area and the hotels. What McGann's is doing just east of here, in that spot, and then at some point that Kroger property coming online at some point. And then we talk about what's going on now and just talking to our building inspectors that, had 81 inspections the other day. And rather than attest to this, residential permits are now coming in all of these subdivisions.
But they're all much lower than that. We're looking at an average, like Bridle Ridge, new houses out there are 180. That's a long way from 350,000. And the ones over at South Point are going to be much less money than that overall, built out.
So, Fred?
So those are the ones we got on the ground now that are currently being pulled permits, and there's some other potential ones to come online.
And the way to minimize that impact is to go after retired development for our senior citizens. Put a lot of what's on our ground into retirement, 55 and older, because that does not impact our school system. It does not impact our safety. Our fire and safety to the degree that younger families do. And it's something that we really need to consider in order to keep the quality of life up for the people that are here and that are trying to raise children here, and not undermine them by continuing to have lower cost housing, which can't sustain itself over the next 20 years.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, anyone?
And so,
Yes, Fred?
And as we talk about the need for public safety, as we discussed, just giving you a brief history of where we've been in terms of our growth over the last 20 years. Being a community of about 2,700 people, and in 1990 to being where we pretty much our last census estimated 22,559, and moving forward. That yes, that growth and continued growth is going to put an increased pressure on our water and sewer systems. It's going to put an impact on our local road, and when we talk about those, we're talking about maintenance and upkeep. One of the things we're doing now is looking at, and that'll probably happen under this budget year, is that we're going to be responsible for upkeeping that wonderful right-of-way along Jonesboro Road, all the way to the interstate. That's going to be one. This park is going to come online this year, and so it's going to potentially be usable by October. We'll have folks walking in this park, hopefully, in some way, shape, or form, and so that's going to have to be upkeeped over time, as well as Jonesboro Road and as well as Avalon coming on. And so when we talk about what our parks budget look like, about $59,000 or $60,000, recognize that these things aren't going to be maintained by themselves. It's fine to pay for these things out of SPLOST. SPLOST don't pay for operations and maintenance.
I'm
And
glad
so,
they pointed that out, because that's where we found ourselves.
And
We
so-
bought all these parks with SPOS money, but now we gotta have general fund money to maintain them.
That is
We need to
correct.
keep that in mind.
and so, and part of that, part of that frank discussion, I think, is when we talk, it just can't be just the folks in this room. It has to be a conversation with the community as a whole. When we talk about the vision of the city and where we want, and where the community want the city to be. And it has to be an open dialogue, not old McDonough, not new McDonough, but a combination of old and new McDonough, charting the future for future McDonough, and where we want to be. Because if these are the amenities that people want and like, it don't come cheap, and it don't come free. And so what role do you want to play as a local citizen in having that quality of life when we're providing these parks and wonderful trail systems and so forth? Swanee doors, they didn't come cheap when they built them. They went up on their millage rate by a lot to build what you see in today's Swanee. And that was a conservative county back in 2000. But they did it, and not one of those folks lost an election, voted out of office. They either walked off on their own or they took out their endeavors. And we were at the Henry County Association meeting 2 years ago when the mayor from Swanee was talking about what went on in Swanee. And they sat and charted that plan for that community, and they told the citizens and they showed the citizens had faith in them. And when they built what they built, they were able to touch it. Everybody loved what they got there. So that's part of the process as we talk about moving forward. I think we need to have that kind of same conversation with our folks as to where y'all want this community to be. and what it's gonna take to provide that quality level of service. You know, we don't need, is it gonna impact this budget? No, but I'm telling you, not to the extent, but as you bring these things and other projects online, yes. I mean, that's something we can look down the road.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Unfortunately, with the master plan for Alexander Park, there was a financial feasibility done, and there was a projected program over the next 10 years when it was originally planned and put out there. And there were certain steps that were taken in order for it to be sustainable. But that has not been followed. Otherwise, you would not be looking at having major cost involved outside of SPOS in the near future.
Okay, what other comments relative to the proposed budget in this presentation, ladies, gentlemen? We'll be acting on this on Monday night in a formal fashion.
Mayor, my question was, I know this was a special call meeting because we received this information before, but my question was, you were concerned about the proposal and said that you wanted to, cut the budget by $500,000. Do you have a proposal?
Yes, no, I don't have a proposal, that'd be up to Fred. I mean, it's a number of avenues you could cut. In 1993 and 1994, we had a mean year, and I think that's where we're on today. Travel. I'd love for us to be at GMA in Atlanta. I'd love for us to be in Savannah. For years, we didn't go. There's a lot of opportunities there to do a lot of cutting. You can cut newsletters, you can cut postage, you can $50,000 before you bat an eye. We got some non-essential personnel, which I agree with Fred. He's already taken out too. I thought that was a great proposal. But it bothers me, Ms. Benson. I am so conscious, and the fiscal uncertainty here bothers me tremendously. We had 2.5 months of fund balance. I wrote a letter in October 2011 or 12 that we get up to 3 months and possibly 6, but never did think we'd ever get to 6. But we had 2.5 months, and I understand what the loss was. It was necessary, and I understand that. But you end up with $136,642, which is, it's repetitive. You all have heard the story 100 times. I'm just dollar conscious. $136,942, we got 4 days of operation. And that was 2013, June the 30th. Today, I don't know where we stand. I honestly don't know where we stand. I talked to Deborah today, and she's doing a marvelous job. And she doesn't have the May figures, and we obviously don't have June figures, and we'll probably have those in the middle of July. I just feel so much more comfortable knowing where we stand. I have never, in all the years I've been here, we had a long, and we all know that it took a while for the audit. It won't next year, because it's gonna be done in less than 4 months. I'm working on that as I speak, so if we get the audit done, we'll know something by November 1st. But this uncertainty, Ms. Vincent, just troubles me so much that we've had a whole year here, and I don't know where we really stand. As it ended, I'm opposed to the court bill. I'll be first to admit that. I'm opposed to spending money on these 4 firemen and this policeman and any other things at this point in time. 3 weeks ago, I met with the top officials here in fire and police. And I told them I would be the first to join with every one of these council members that dearly, that is a #1 priority. But I'm at the point, and I asked the question of all 3. I said, I hate to tell you how I feel about this. I just don't feel comfortable. And I was told that, Billy, we may get to a 3 without the 4. We started at a 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. We may not get to a 3 if we had 4. Do we need those 4? Absolutely, absolutely. And the police officer. But I'm just not prepared to move in that direction now, because I don't know where we stand fiscally. And until I do, I'm not suggesting wait till November to find out where we stand. I think that all of us sit down and sometime middle of July, and we'll have a pretty good balance of where we are versus the July cumulative figure. But the chief and I talked yesterday, and we talked about revenues and fines. They're down like $35,000 a month on the average for the last 2 months. Obviously, I don't know about this, but that's kind of minor stuff. But anyway, as I say, I don't know what your plans are, but there are opportunities. And of course, this thing here I've had for 60 years. If you knock out the apostrophe and T, ladies and gentlemen, it can be done. I've had it on my desk for 60 years, and I'll continue to have it on my desk. I'm firmly convinced that we want to sincerely do it as a body, and then we find that hey, Billy, you were so wrong. You were so wrong. I'd be first to come up with and recommend a budget amendment and put all this back. But right now, I just can't support that.
Mayor, I'm sorry, and it's fine, you know, all of us are by virtue of the role we serve, are entitled legally to our own opinion and our own votes. But this is where I'm trying to get to. The number 500,000, what is that based upon?
Oh, it's arbitrary. It's totally arbitrary. It's 16 days. 16 days of fund balance. In other words, if you had, like Fred came up with, like $15,000 left over in revenues, over expenditures, it'd be $515,000, and put it in and have it in for fund balance, over a period of 12 months or whatever. The revenues would exceed expenditures of 500,000. But it takes a lot of changing, as I said, positions, look at travel, look at conferences, look at everything we do and see how far we can get. I don't know whether we can reach 500.
Yeah, and see, I guess my approach is, our approach, of course, is different. And what I'm thinking about is, as we approach this, what I think we should be doing is trying to identify what services it is that we're going to provide. Because when you say it can be done, we could right now, through the stroke of a pen, say we're going to reduce the entire budget by X%. And we'll be right at $500,000 or more. But what that does not do is it doesn't take into account the level of service that we're wanting to provide for our citizens.
I totally disagree, but go ahead.
So, and that's why I keep asking in fairness, I want to know where you are so I can mentally go through that process.
When you have a pretty professional member of staff here, and they have convinced me, yes, Billy, we would need that. But if the needs are so great fiscally, we can postpone the 4 firemen and the policemen, and of course you got public works too. Our employees, 2010 we had 142. We've got 168 today, which is an 18% increase. And also, Fred alluded to this too, I think has too, that the Mercer report, I don't know what it will say. I don't know whether it combine any jobs or not, but that's part of the overall process. That could be a combination of jobs. Do you want to eliminate a job? Absolutely not, if they're necessary. But it will take a lot of work to sit down and try to analyze all these positions. But particularly when you've got these people working on it, you don't want to jump in there and.
So, are you telling me that the chief, both the chiefs, have indicated that the 4 fireman position and the 1 police officer, that they don't need those positions?
No, I am not saying that. Yes, they need them. They'd like to have them. But when I told them I was so concerned about the fiscal condition of this city, he said, Billy, if we can get to a 3-on-5, let's use 5, without those. We may, if you had the 4,
We may or may not get to the 3. And I said, as soon as I feel comfortable with the situation, I'll be the first to admit and seek an amendment to go out and hire these 4. You all agree that we need the 4. But I just, the court building, I just feel like that we can't afford that right now. And some of these other things, yes, sir.
I just want to say that in regards to the fire department, I don't think the ISO should be why we do it. It should-
That's what we're saying. We don't think it, and that's what I said to start with.
It is,
It's safety.
is to, if we go that way, if that's how we do, I don't believe ISO should even be in the conversation, quite honestly.
That's fine. That's fine.
It is just safety, because we get hung up on this ISO, and that's an outside source that's gonna tell us what we are. We don't tell them what we want to be.
Correct.
And so, the conversation, I think we really need to move towards
Safety.
the level of safety, level of service. If we go that way, the ISO, we really, like I said, it's a pure benefit. But whether we do it this year or not, it needs to be addressed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree.
But-
I just feel like this is the year to do it. But you people have to
And-
make up your own mind.
And something that I am worried about is, I'm really worried about whether or not Public Works is, going to be funded properly to be able to operate properly and meet the needs, because I know right now, there is equipment that needs to be fixed that they can't do anything about until the budget is taken care of. I also know that there have been things, in Public Works, where, that could have been taken care of, where money, was not spent as properly as it could have been. When we said, go ahead and buy a new piece of equipment, they continued to fix old equipment, to the point of a person's salary. They would have extra money had that piece of equipment been dumped and the new piece of equipment purchased. And I just think that those things, I think, are headed in a much better direction right now. But I am very concerned whether or not they're actually too lean, in the ability to provide the service. I know that people are, in this city, are so thrilled that when we have a storm, that the chipper truck gets around and the limbs and what have you are taken care of, and that we're in, because we get in much better shape quicker than a lot of our neighbors tend to get their communities in shape as far as those things are concerned. But I'm really concerned that, we're going to have the capability to do that. Taking on Jonesboro Road maintenance is a plus for us, because we get swapped. We're swapping paving work for whatever work we do on Jonesboro Road. Although that in itself still requires us to have the staff available. We do have equipment the county doesn't even have. So, but I am concerned that they don't have enough money.
And I want to piggyback, echo everything that my colleague just said. I'm concerned about that department from a manpower standpoint, and I will say this. We've outlined the projected parks and the fact that they're coming online. But even more so than that, and this is a conversation that I've had with the county, Gail has had with the county, it's not germane specifically to Jonesboro Road, but it covers the entire city. When people come to our city, corporations, and they're looking at whether or not they want to move here, they're gonna look at schools, they're going to look at quality of life, they're gonna look at safety, but a big part of quality of life is the whole appearance of your community. And when you come in and it's trashy, there's grass growing in the right of way, there are weeds everywhere. I would like to see the entire county join forces to come up with a cooperative agreement where that's gonna be a priority. Because when you're coming in off of I-75 and you're sitting right there, and it's debris everywhere, that doesn't bode well for folks' impression of McDonough. And so, I understand that we're already in a lean position by virtue of the economy, but I'm really concerned because those guys were really, really, really hard. And that position, those positions who actually do this physical work are the first tier in terms of entry-level positions in the city. And we want to make sure that we support our city administrator as well as a department head and making sure that they have all the resources that they need to get that work done. Because I see things every day that I want to call and complain about. But the thing that stops me is, where's the money? And then when you talk to people who are complaining to you, it's hard to get them to understand that there is a budget behind maintenance. And we have never made this a priority. And it really needs to be a priority. And Mayor, respectfully, you know, I do understand everything that you're saying. My thoughts about this is that we have grown beyond the ability to pull an arbitrary number out of the air, that we really have to be able to balance service delivery with the number of citizens, the needs in our community, because I'm telling you, McDonough, even though we are our own entity, we are in competition with other cities within Henry County. And we are in competition with other cities within the region. And if we don't keep the people who are here, and we don't incite, induce, encourage other people to move to McDonough based on our appearance, our infrastructure, our quality of life, then we're always going to be behind the 8 ball in struggling and looking at increasing millage rate, because we are not going to have enough money to support the level of service. We can't roll back the population. We can't do it. We can't de-annex places. We are where we are, and we're headed somewhere, but we need to plan more carefully about where it is that we're going. But even right now, we're not at the level that we should be functioning at in order to sustain where we currently are. And so I would really like for us to approach what we do more from a planning standpoint, and less from just, you know, I'd like to see it differently. I'm trying to be very careful about how I say it, but I think you understand my gist.
We got 3 extremely competent individuals, 5 police, and our interim public works director is doing such a tremendous, marvelous job. He's getting so much done. And I want you to understand this, Vincent, public works is my first love. I came on board secondly, but public works does make a difference, and you're absolutely right about it. When I came here in 1972, they put me on the public works committee. I wouldn't have taken anything for them, because we worked so hard together to make McDonough what it is, as you alluded to, cleanliness of streets, among other things. So
But they're not clean. That's my whole point.
Well, I mean,
They're not clean.
we had 11 public works people up until 3 years ago. We got 22 now, and so we're getting a staff now. We may not have enough of those either. I hadn't even thought about public works.
But this is really my point, because I want to be very clear. I don't want anybody to mistake what I'm saying. The guys are doing as much as they can.
Yeah.
They are operating at their top efficiency. The demands are greater than what we have provided. When you talk to them, they are tired. When you see them working on the side of the road, you see the magnitude of the work that they do. And so, as leaders within the city, we need to understand that the demand is greater than the resources that we have provided. And because of the position, historically, public works can often be overlooked by policymakers until folks start to complain. So I just wanted to agree with my colleague she brought it up. I fully support her, and I support the fact that I would like for us to help our city administrator to bring Public Works up to the level that it needs to be at, because really, that is one of the indicators that the community looks at when they're trying to decide whether or not we're doing a good job. And when the city is not pristine, when the county's not pristine, they say we're not doing what we're supposed to do.
You know, what I would like for us to do as a council is, Keith has really been working to try to get a handle on everything.
And he has.
And he has done a magnificent job, and I've been very proud of everything that he's done. And I am sure, with him sitting there, that some of what's being said, that even though he's sitting there very respectfully and not showing yay nor nay, that there are a lot of yeses going on in his head. Because what we need is, we need a real plan out here of neighborhoods and requirements and what comes about and what's needed and what have you, because it will take you very long to figure out that the reason certain things aren't being done or taken care of, where they appear to be well taken care of, is because they never can get, by the time they're pulled off for special events,
Right.
or we have a big storm issue or whatever, because we're at such a critical point of looking after things. We really need, I think, to take a real look at it over this next year and know exactly, where we're going. Need to look at it just like we have been looking at public safety, and like we've been putting public safety out front. We need to keep them out front. They are number one, but Public Works needs to be right up there with them, because it is the image. And Lord knows, I have worried about the image of, as all of us have, but on Jonesboro Road, that was a singularly fought battle virtually out there. So I just, I'd like to see, us really zone in and say, what is the level of expectation, and then what can we afford to do?
You're gonna see such a decided change. You've already experienced that.
Yes,
You just wait another 2 or 3 months. We've got the leadership we need.
yes.
And I think you're gonna be pleased, the citizens gonna be pleased, Ms. Vincent's gonna be pleased, and all of us. It may take some more people, I don't know. But right now, it's gonna be such a dramatic change, you won't.
Well, I'm not arguing that fact, because I truly believe that. But while we are doing it, I do want us to take a very hard look at what standard we really want to maintain. And we need for the new person to be very honest about what it takes for his force to be able to provide that level, so that we can, if we can't afford it now, that we can work towards being able to get there. Because I don't want to see us, I know we made a big difference just taking a sweeper down Jonesboro Road. I'm sorry, but we did. And even though the shopping center out there is not money in our pockets per se, as a city, it certainly has a cleaner and better look, because we, the city of McDonough, are sweeping it and keeping some of the trash. Because when I could take photographs, timed photographs, of a pasteboard box stuck underneath a guardrail for a period of 6.5 months to prove a point.
Okay.
I mean, we just, I'm sorry, but you know how I feel about us being clean and neat, about getting off the expressway and looking nice. I mean, we've talked about it for years, and I just think it's time that, we really make it a priority with everybody.
Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am.
My question is, and Keith may have done some of these types of projections already. some things aren't just leadership, it's also manpower. And that's a big thing, because you can only mow so much grass per day. Men are not machines, neither are women for that matter. When we talk about the number of square miles within the city that has to be serviced through Public Works, at some point, I'm not saying go home and do this tonight, but I think it would be a great exercise through yourself and the city administrator to really come back to us and to say to us, we have this much right of way, we own this much property, we have this much intergovernmental agreements in terms of maintenance, because we really need to be able to say, we have to have this number of people in order to service this much land. And we don't have that type of information. 22 sounds like a lot, but when you got everybody that you have that's out there on the back of a mower with a weed eater trying to keep up with this stuff as rapidly as it's growing, and grass is growing like kudzu now, I know we have to always be behind the 8 ball. I know Mr. Gardner has cut the grass. I've done some Roundup stuff myself, you know, trying to kill weeds. But this is serious, and we don't want your people to ever feel like we're not concerned and we're not so supportive. So please let them know that we are. But this does have to be put on the radar, because it is very important. And I just want us as policymakers to not stop at saying, well, we've got somebody else in leadership, because Keith can only do so much. He's got to have the resources there to get the job done.
I can assure you he will share that information with you. He's working diligently on weekends about the future, and I've had some private conversation with him. I'm just so pleased in the managerial role, you're going to see a decided change in that. Does he need more? I don't know, but I assure you he will certainly tell you if he does. And well, we talked about it just about all we need to, but all those things are important. Public works is critical. Community development, another great organization we got. We have wonderful talent, good leaders, and so you'll have to decide on Monday.
One more question to you.
Yeah, that's
Because
fine.
you indicated to the city administrator that you wanted to delegate the responsibility of cutting the budget by $500,000 to come up with a proposal, and he's already indicated that he's cut as much as he feels that he can cut given the level of service required. Is there anything else that you have for us to consider? No? Okay.
None whatsoever. And as I said, I applaud our administrator. 2 of the positions that are not in the budget, didn't need to be in the budget, and that's substantial money. It certainly is. No, I don't have any more, man. Yes, Fred. Yes.
Well, we got to adopt the budget. The next meeting we have is Monday, which is a couple of days away, and I really need from you guys, mayor and council, is really some direction on how y'all want to do, because I've got to bring a budget to you. You've got a budget, but you've also got an alternative, and so we need to know what we
got
need
2 or
to
3
bring to
options.
you guys on Monday, because we have a $12.4 million budget, and I know the mayor says he wants to cut travel and training. What I sent to all of you as part of the response to the mayor's email was, when we look at travel and training for FY15 citywide, $56,000. Of that, $26,000 is mayor and council. When we look at education and training citywide, it's $45,000. $10,006 of that is mayor and council. So if y'all want to cut the budget, y'all need to give me some direction as to what y'all want cut. Who is not going to? Is anybody going to Savannah in 2015? Is anybody going to Mayor's Day in 2015? Because I don't want to be the one to pick, and I don't want y'all looking at me, slapping me sideways because, Mr. Craig Elroy didn't get to go, and he really wanted to go, And so Mr. Elroy is looking at me sideways like, why you cutting me out of the budget? So you know,
I have.
I need y'all to help me along that way, please.
My understanding, and Mayor, please correct me if I'm wrong, that there is no formal recommendation that's coming from the mayor. Therefore, the recommendations, which are currently the recommendations of the city administrator, are the ones that we are entertaining. So of those recommendations, and if you would just kind of recap what they are, you're needing us to take action on those two recommendations, or?
Well, I mean, the mayor stated that he would love for us to reduce travel and training.
That's not gonna get us to $500,000.
It is not.
So it's not significant.
And so, but if that's where he thinks that we should start and you guys are in agreement, then I need to know how y'all want this to be done. You know, I could decide where I'm gonna travel and train on my own and my staff, but for my bosses, I don't want to be determining who gets to go and who don't get to go to certain things. So y'all have to say, well, we don't want to cut the travel and training budget for FY15. Let's look at that in FY16. Then that's fine, and we leave it as is.
What are the current recommendations that are on the table? What are we being, what outside of the, because those are comments.
Okay, the mayor's asked for us to, he gave a number of things he wanted us to look at in terms of reduction in the budget. And the key areas were travel training on the main council side, travel training on the staff side. He wants us to look at reduction in workforce.
That's not coming as a formal recommendation
That's
from the
not-
mayor.
that's
what
not
he
what
just
he's asking.
indicated.
All right,
Fred,
so,
that education, is some of that required to keep some designations?
well, and that's what I said. I mean, for me, I have a national certification that I have to sit an 8-hour exam for in order to keep.
Do we know how much that number is, what is required
And here, how many employees have certifications?
of that travel or education expense? I'm not asking you to spit off the top of your head, I'm just, is there any way to get to what is required and what is,
Well, I mean,
what is outside of required?
I can go down, we can drill down to that level with to find out who all
Would you say it's more
certified
than
or
half or
certified.
less than half? I mean, just to give
It's
you a
probably
ballpark.
less than half, but the other side of this equation too, as I explained in here, is that, you know, we're trying to fully utilize the system that we spent a boatload of money on, which required us to even have to send a staff person to Texas to the training class a couple of months ago.
You're
because
talking about
Encode. And so as we started looking at trying to make sure that she knows how to use Encode fully, he knows how to Encode fully, as we try to make this thing go citywide, because we paid for it already. But nobody was trained. That's a cost. Every time we call these folks, and we gotta ask them, and one of the things we've been discussing is, can you all bring somebody down here to help us?
That was my
To
next
bring
question.
us up to snuff, because right now you got 2 employees that truly know Encode, that can move back and forth in this thing pretty good. The budget, Bernard and Lynn, because they've been working with Encode over the last 8-9 months on a hand-to-hand basis. But at the same time, as we're asking staff to do a little bit more with Encode, we have to be able to learn Encode and teach Encode.
Well, then can our staff teach?
But that's not just
our other
Encode.
staff?
I mean, these guys gotta go to training, his guys gotta go to training. If you want, you talk about a professional workforce, but if you don't send code enforcement, then you end up code enforcement and CJs all over again, and then we're back in the news because dude didn't know what he was supposed to be doing, we just pluck him off the street, and put him in code enforcement uniform.
Mr. City
So
Administrator,
it's not just the certification, but it's
What
making
she
sure
was
that our staff
asking is that you had,
what are our recommendations?
yeah, what is your budget recommendation to us?
You have the budget of $12.4 million, but you also have an alternative that moves the budget to 12.9, and that is to fund the firefighters, the police officers, and the municipal court. And so that, in essence, if you guys want us to bring that to you guys, we can. We've got that kind of scenario. But if you say we want you to cut, then I need to get some.
Let me ask you a question, do you know what the budget would be? Let's say we did the firefighters, we did the police officers, which I think we need to address. But we didn't do the court. and we waited until July, August, whatever, to know where we are financially better, we could then do a budget revision at that time, but we don't have to commit to the court now.
Well, let me tell you the scenario, and this is how.
Because I am a little concerned about taking on debt, not knowing exactly where we are.
Understood, and the key here is, you know, if y'all vote to fund police and fire through a millage increase, the millage increase we don't vote on the millage increase till the new tax just comes out in August, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe about 4.06.
Somewhere around August. So in between now and August, our tax assessors are actually defining those numbers, and they typically communicate those to us as to what they see in terms of where we're going. Now, they made an estimate a couple of months ago, minus appeals out of that estimate and where they think they should be, they'll have a better defined number on that. So even if you adopt it, the key is you can always not say, okay, we're not gonna move in that direction, go with what was initially done. The problem you're gonna have is that you find out that you do need these folks, as the mayor was saying, if that happens, and you pass the millage rate increase, you can't go back and adjust the millage rate after that date, you're done, till 2016. At that point, you're done. Unless we see some other revenues or cut some other way in the budget to provide for them, you can't do it anymore. So that's what
that's kind of what I'm getting to, is that if we find we're happy where we are financially down the road, maybe we can find ways to cut those expenses then to pay for the court.
But let me go back now, because realize, as I told you, when these guys came to me with the $14 million in requests, you know, there were wants and needs in there. The wants got taken out, but I'm gonna tell you, the needs got taken out too.
Yeah.
Because you have needs, priority
That's what I
1,
was
2,
saying.
3, and 4, and if you tell me, hey, priority 1 are these 2 things here, need number 4 ain't gonna get done because you already listed what your top needs are, but Fred, I can do without this for this year, but I need this. So that didn't get put in the budget because you basically said my priority is 1, 2, and 3. 4, even though that's a need, I could survive without it. You know, would that harm our operations? Maybe, but at the same time, when I get a revenue projection, I gotta meet that number with the expenses, and so in every community, you're gonna find this, every city administrator, every city manager, they have to look at that, and some needs don't all get put in the budget because you have to come to a final point, okay? So that's where we are today. So, and so, you know, if you say don't fund, do these things, I mean, we'll make that happen. You know, the key is, on the millage rate, if we just adopt the budget at $12.4 million, that don't include anybody, that's fine. We don't have a lot of time between now and I guess the time when we truly get to digest it to say, let's adjust.
I think last year we had to have it to the state by August 1st.
August 1st, yeah. So
August
you're
1st.
talking,
You got an 18%
talking-
increase in digestible said, which I think is basically true. And,
but we took
and you
out
gotta get that
8%
credit.
for
You gotta get-
appeals.
We did 10%.
So we reduced that down because we know some of those will get challenged and win, so we
Yeah,
don't want.
definitely. And
Yeah.
with the increase, you're gonna have a lot more people than normal.
Oh, yeah.
But Craig, what I'm worried about is this. The need for a municipal court was projected 12, 13, 14 years ago.
I completely agree.
And really, literally,
It's a terrible situation.
it was projected then.
And we're spending.
Oh,
what-
I
Then
mean,
it was moved forward and there was a plan in place to expand where the church is now, to build a building, and there was property purchased there in order to do it. Then things changed and we went looking for another site.
No,
And you know the scenario all the way around. But the need for that courthouse, the projected need for that courthouse has not changed. It's just gotten right on top of us.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to take a deep breath and do what we need to do.
To me, it all comes down to safety on all accounts. The courthouse is a safety
You got
concern.
issue there, yes.
Just this past 2 weeks, you've seen issues pop up in our own state that kind of make you look at a trailer that's not the most secure location. And then public safety as well. It's just, you know, I think we really need to think long and hard and make sure that if we do this millage increase, we can actually deliver the service we're.
And that's where and that's where we carefully run the numbers and look at where we need to be in terms of providing that. And that's the village recommendation y'all got from us. The other side of this too is that realize that in 06, 08, we as a city went to the citizens and said, we want to build a municipal courthouse, please give us a 1 cent petty sales tax to build a court and public safety complex. We did that. The citizen says, yes, okay, go ahead and do it. So we went and we got the money and we purchased the property on the premise that these are the things the service we were gonna deliver. So now, we're now 7 years removed from that point in time. So now we have an opportunity to build a courthouse. As I explained to the man sitting down with Mr. Camp earlier this week, you know, our interest rates have gone down. The other side of this though is the cost of construction
It's going up.
is going up. And so as we sit back and say, we don't wanna do it, recognize that next year this time, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, what would have cost you $4 million might cost you $4.9 or $4.6 million out of the cost based on construction and cost of construction. So, you know, how do you adjust for that? But at the same time, the reason why we said, you know, if you want to fund these things, the millage rate is the best way to provide for it, because that is the most stable source of revenue. If you cut your way into this and then you have to add back on, guess what you just did? You see what I'm saying?
Mr. Gardner.
You can't cut your way there and turn around and say, yeah, we need additional staffing. So now you just add additional cost, but you don't have the consistent revenue stream necessary to provide.
But I'm just talking about the basic ability of the court to function, the safety of the people that are involved in it. And we're talking about new kinds of gun laws now, and people in situations with our court system that are, you know, that are beyond the point of even being safe.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Fred,
sir,
thank you.
I wanted to
Yes,
ask Frederick,
Plus,
City Administrator Gardner, a question. The 1 penny sales tax that you made reference to, those were SPOS dollars?
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't there a legal obligation for us to fulfill the spirit of the SPOS? So don't we have to construct?
There's a legal obligation for us to do what we say we were gonna do on the SPOS, and we've done that.
Oh, that was the bottom.
That was to purchase the property.
We
But
Purchase
every,
of property for
Now,
the
for the
purpose
purpose of a public safety. Now, the actual intent was to purchase the property. We fulfilled that obligation. But overall, as we sold that to the public way back when, the goal was to purchase the property, not to sit there in perpetuity, but to build a public safety complex on police and court. And so at some point, you know, we have to say to ourselves, our citizens gave us a mandate to some degree to do that. How we done it?
And that's
But-
why I specifically used the word, there's a difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law.
Correct.
And so I'm speaking of the spirit of the law in terms of our actually manifesting the municipal court in agreement with that 1 penny sales tax.
But also, on top of that, as the mayor would say, you also have to look at, because that side of the equation wasn't funded through SPOS in SPOS 5, SPOS 4, we didn't put construction of courthouse in there. We could have, but we didn't, okay? So in essence, we're now saying that the construction of that facility will be done on the back of the general fund. So how do you now provide for that financial obligation? And as the mayor said, is this the time? Well, you know, from the staff standpoint, if to address it with all the needs that we got from the departments, from the department heads, and, you know, I want to make sure that we address their concerns first and foremost, and then look on everything else behind that, recognizing that operations is key. But, you know, if they need, that courthouse would have to be done through a different means, and the different means was, you have to adjust the millage rate to make it happen. Over time, could we do it? Yeah, I think there's some room in there, but once again, as that time period go along, we're going to see either the interest rate creep up, and or cost of construction creep up. We're talking to Bill Camp. Bill Camp basically told me yesterday, and I got an email, send that stuff, print it out and send it to the man, email it. But he basically said to us that, hey guys, I mean, this seems to be the best time because the interest rates have actually fallen. Don't know how long they'll stay there, but in essence, what we have projected as part of the total public safety adjustment in the millage rate, yes, we can sustain that through that consistent form of revenue stream. But that's, once again, that's the wish of
And
everybody.
because of the interest rate and the rise in cost, that may end up being a wash, and we'd be able to get the building
Well,
within the parameters that we
And the
started.
one thing that Justin did, that New South and those guys commented on was that he did put some bump in there that they think would stave off right now what they see as increase in the market cost. So we're pretty much there, but the longer we wait, that bump is not gonna hold very long, and it's gonna go above that bump that he put in there. So, you know, but that's, once again, that's a decision that the mayor council will say, and if that's something that we need to do. I know the mayor said that in terms of where we are financially, I know they've been working to get the financial statements out, and I don't know when the next one is gonna come out.
The financial statements are generally completed by the 25th of the month. So
And they're working.
There's a lot,
They
there's a,
sincerely are.
bank statements are coming in and things of that nature, so. By the 25th, the financials are in, so. And that's
So-
of the preceding, the subsequent month.
You know, and we have been treading lightly, as I explained to the department heads, because
It's
as we
been
all
lean
know,
around here, and that's good. It
our
really has.
Our revenue for the most part comes in between the months of November and January as property tax. We continue to get sales tax in, but not at the amount that we get in terms of our taxes, or property taxes. So,
I like the fact they don't have to fit the historical layout of it. We gotta have
No,
everything
well, I'm
decided.
just,
I
I
think
want,
Steve Egan will say they'll be able
I'm not
to,
saying
they're gonna
wait
give us
for
some preliminaries pretty soon. And I think we could request where they are at this point.
Yeah.
That's something we could look at, and ask them to kind of give us.
Apparently, it's been going very well.
We've got a good response on the surveys from the employees. I don't know if it was 100% or not, but I think it was pretty close.
We've had a real good response.
Okay, Mr. Gardner, thank you. And you and Ms. Molina, I appreciate that presentation, and then of course be up to council to make that decision on Monday relative to, you know, the option 1, 2, or 3, I guess.
is that what we can do? Can you bring option 1 and 2 or 3?
Which options are you looking at? We have the options, the 4.99
Right.
mil, we have.
Well, I don't see anybody going over that.
I mean,
No, we're not recommending going anywhere above that.
I think the 4.99 and then the staying true.
We can bring those,
so we got the two.
we can bring those
Stay
two,
where we are.
yes. Yes, we can bring those two.
Yeah, we'll have more money.
No, that's not an option.
No. Third option, unless y'all wanted to go back and see and cut
No, we can't go.
more beyond that. I mean, that could be an
Yeah,
option and say,
no, I can't go any higher. I mean, like I said, I'm uncomfortable right now with that, but, just thinking about it, but I think we should address public safety fund now.
Well, again, we cannot continue to sit. I know that you're new, and I know that you like myself are facing, you know, a year coming forward of us. But then what we all need to understand is that courthouse has been around for a long time, and it needs to be taken care of. We need to do check or whatever. I mean, we have to put our big boy pants on at that point.
All right, folks, that's bad enough. Anybody have any further comments? You'll have that opportunity to make your decision on Monday. We all will, and there's been a lot of work involved with you and Lolita and others, and I applaud you for that. I appreciate it. And on behalf of the council. Yes, ma'am.
If y'all take all your budget stuff tonight, be sure and bring it back Monday. And don't forget, I need a head count tomorrow about the Dennis
I
Virginia
believe
Bank.
this right here.
We're not doing executive session.
I believe we're not doing
No,
exactly.
I didn't think we would, but I put it down if needed. Yeah. It's probably good things.
Are we through then?
Fred, you have anything? No, sir. Thank you so much. Entertained motion for adjournment.
So, second.
All in favor? Thank you all so much.
I like the fact that they don't have to fit the historical layout of it.